Hello, students! We are ready for our mini lesson about comparing fractions. So we are on a new standard, but it goes right along with equivalent fractions. So we have 5 strategies that can help us compare fractions and think, are they equivalent? Is one greater than? Is one less than? So we're going to look at the first one. So this week or last week, depending on when you did it, we had a little game where you would roll the dice and you would find a fraction and you would compare it to a half. So that's our first strategy to help us. Okay, so strategy number 1 for comparing fractions is compare each fraction to a half to decide if it is greater than, less than, or equal to a half. If each fraction compares to a half differently, you're going to have to use a new strategy. So let me show you what that might mean. All right. So say I'm given 2/4, and they want you to compare it to 1/3. Okay? So if I have 2/4 and 1/3. Now, I know that 2/4 is equivalent to a half. And I also know that 1/3 is less than a half. How I know that is 1/3, that's a bigger denominator. So the larger the denominator, the smaller the piece. So I know that 2/4 is greater than 1/3. So that's using strategy number 1, comparing to a half. But sometimes you can't use this strategy, y'all, because they're too close. Now let me show you, or they're both greater than a half. So say that you're given, this takes forever. Say that you're given a fraction 3/4. I know 3/4 is greater than a half. And they want you to compare 3/4 to 6/7. Well, they're both 1 away from a whole, but they're both greater than a half. So I cannot use strategy number 1 to help me solve this. But we're going to talk about all of these different strategies as the week goes on. But strategy number 1 couldn't be used for this, okay? Now, let's talk about strategy number 2. All right, we're ready to move on to the second and third strategy. These are the only 3 we're going to talk about today to help us with our activity. Strategy number 2 and strategy number 3 are both very helpful when you're comparing fractions, okay? So strategy number 2, so read along with me as I read out loud, is same denominator. If the denominator is the same, the pieces are the same size. Compare the numerator. The greater the numerator is, the greater the fraction. Okay? So let me give you an example using fraction tiles. Okay, so I have some fraction tiles. I'm ready to go. So say I have the fraction 3/6. Right? And they are comparing 3/6 and 2/6. Now, when it is the same denominator, you're just comparing the numerator. So say they ask you which one, so 2/6 compared to 3/6. Well, it's just like, do you want 2 pieces of pizza or 3? And in this case, we're starving and we want the most amount of pizza. So 2/6 is less than 3/6. Do you see how right here it shows me? And if you get a problem like this, you should say, woohoo, because all you have to do is compare the numerator. Now, the third strategy that we're going to talk about today, and that's the last strategy we're going to use, is also one that if you get it, as long as you understand that the larger the denominator, the smaller the piece, you'll be good to go. So I'm going to read it out loud while y'all read it with me. So, same numerator. If the numerators are the same, you have the same number of parts to consider. Compare the denominator, and remember, the greater the denominator, the smaller the piece. We always talk about it like sharing. If I'm really hungry, I probably want to share with less people so I get more. So, say that I have 2/5 compared to 2/12. So you see this right here. Now, they have a different denominator. It's cut into different slices. So when you have the same numerator, you have to think kind of backwards than anything that you've learned so far. So 2/5 compared to 12, Now, remember, the larger the denominator, the smaller the piece. So if I have the same numerator, I know that 2/5 is much greater than 2/12. So when you're comparing fractions, these are 3 strategies that you can use to quickly answer those questions. Now, we do have 2 more strategies that we're going to learn towards the end of the week. So have some fun with the activity using these 3 strategies.